You're listening to a Quad M Productions special presentation.
Let's turn the clock back a couple of years to 2010. Now, I was surfing YouTube, as I often do, and I was looking up and watching various documentaries of comic books, movies, and comic book movies. And during that time, I happened upon a series of videos entitled History of Comics on Film. Now, after viewing these, I was completely hooked. The presentation was phenomenal, the details were informative, and the research done showed that this was truly a project of love. Now let's fast forward roughly 6 years and 63 episodes later, and the hits just keep on coming. Between History of Comics, various podcasts, and articles on his Blogspot page, it's amazing that he even has time to breathe. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome the charismatic captain of the comic book craziness. You like that little Stanley alliteratism there?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Crabbe. Derek, hey, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate
taking the time. This is awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's very, very nice. It's a wonderful intro. Thank you.
Hey, that's what we do. We put the shine on everybody. So. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start off just for people who may not be in the know. Who is Derek Crabbe?
This was a tough question. This is like the job interview question, I suppose. But I guess just keeping it limited. I mean, as far as what your intro was, I mean, I've been producing internet web series since about 2008. And as far as podcasting goes, I pretty much have been doing that since 2011. So as far as my interests and hobbies, I mean, obviously, like, I love comics. I love adaptations of comic book related material. Mm-hmm. And I mean, as far as the podcasting goes, I mean, that's even more open-ended where, we can talk about basically whatever we want. I mean, we talk about all kinds of different genres and topics and anything that basically, things that I don't get the chance to do with History of Comics on Film. I get a chance to shoot the breeze with people about, films or, other comic series or cartoons or, any kind of, nostalgic trip that somebody might have. So
right.
That's pretty much, I mean, as far as me personally, like, I mean, I grew up, I was born in Brooklyn. So I was, I guess I started out as an East Coast kid per se, but I mean, at a really early age, I moved over to the West Coast and I've been in California pretty much my whole life. But as far as areas and stuff. I mean, I lived in the California Bay Area for a long time. I went out to school in the Los Angeles area. I had some aspirations of getting into acting, and when that did not prove a fruitful venture,
right.
I came back to the California Bay Area, and I'm doing my own stuff as far as 9 to 5 type things. But I mean, as far as my hobbies and passions and everything, I mean, that's like kind of as you said. I mean, it gets tougher and tougher to find time to do everything, but I mean, the podcasting has been like a weekly endeavor, so we usually have weekly content as far as that goes. As far as the videos go, I know a lot of people always ask me like when the next one's going to be, and it's kind of indeterminate, like I mean, basically I kind of do it more for myself now than anything else, so it's like right. When it's finished, I'll slap it up there and I hope people enjoy it and everything, but some of it to me is a learning process for myself, and I just hope to get better at constructing them and releasing them as it goes. And I think I have. So, I mean, hopefully that pattern continues.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you listen to any of the early stuff that we've done with the Quad M show, and I took a listen back here on a road trip the other day. And shit, it seems like a lot of it's unlistenable now, and we're only 30 episodes in, so I totally hear where you're coming from on that one.
I think everybody's their own worst critic. I mean, that's one of those things where I hear a lot of either podcasters or video producers say that, and it's one of those things where part of you wants to go back and George Lucas special edition it up and
right.
correct all those things you see as flaws now. But I think if I did that, I'd be special editioning History of Comics on Film like all day long. So I was like, you know what, as long as you just keep on trucking and try to do things better. I mean, I think I learn and get inspired from other people. So even if it's, listening to say like Quad M or something, I figure I can always get something out of listening to other interesting content. I mean, it's like how they always say, the best artists, what is it? The best artists steal or whatever, like that kind of thing. So it's like one of those things where if I see something I like, like I will certainly appropriate it and try to make it applicable to whatever I'm doing, And
no, I've said it many times. If you're stealing from me, you're stealing twice. So
yeah.
and hearkening back a little bit, you don't want the crowd saying, hey, Derek shot first. So that's why we don't go back and fix things.
Right.
So so basically, you and I kind of have the same love affair. You guys, you and I have the same interests, loves, hobbies. I was listening to the you posted up the fan holes episode for today with the Tuesday Transformers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was watching the first commercial, and I immediately said the same thing you guys said when you started the podcast, and it was like everyone was a die combo or whatever that chains were. I mean, the minute they said that, I did the exact same thing, and you guys did. So yeah, no, we are completely and totally on the same wavelength here.
Yeah. I mean, we get a kick out of all that stuff. So I mean, it's funny. We all met on a Transformers message board, and I know all the kids out there are like, "What's a message board, Dad?" But anyway, that's where we all met. So it's funny because for our podcasting, it's like we started in 2011, but we've in a weird way we've known each other for many more years than that. So it's kind of an interesting experience, the whole social media and getting to meet and, like friends and podcast with people or do video projects with people. Like that's all really kind of cool.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, and really, I mean, the whole thing has opened up a whole, a huge world, as far as, if I need a sub, I've got a buddy that, does, comic conventions that I've met at a couple conventions that I've worked at. We've hit it off, and I've been able to have him on the show a couple times thanks to the miracle of Skype and Facebook and all that type of stuff. So it's definitely opened it up to where, a guy in Helena, Montana can sit here and do an interview with a guy out in California, and it sounds like you're in the same room, so you gotta love all that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like the need to mention that there was a guy I originally podcasted with before I ever did my own podcasting, and that was a gentleman named Tim Terrell, but he had an internet radio show called Thoom, and it was all about comic books. And it's funny because I think the way it worked was I posted a response video to Linkara's Atop the Fourth Wall, and then based on that, it got either a bunch of like hate comments or various comments, because I guess I disagreed with the review. Right. But one of the guys that replied to it that thought it was interesting and made some informed comments as opposed to just kind of like hateful things was Tim. And then later on, he asked me to be on his podcast, and I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not really familiar with the podcasting scene, but for sure, let's do it. And basically, I guess that's where I was introduced to the whole idea of, you can get on Skype, you can record, the show and everything. And then I think later on, some of the friends I made on Bot Talk and everything, who are my fellow fan holes, my fellow podcasters, right. I mean, they were the ones who suggested, hey, we should do a podcast. And, we kind of have been rolling with it ever since then. So, I mean, that part of the kind of, I guess, all those things seem to sort of congregate together. I mean, it feels like you can't mention one without mentioning the other.
Right. Well, and that's, we're, kind of old farts on our end. I mean, we're both 40. And we had actually gotten our first start at a local college station. And we lasted a total of 4 episodes. By the 4th episode, we ended up getting kicked off the air because it was a Catholic radio. It was a Catholic school. It was a Catholic college. So they didn't quite agree with some of the topics and things we were talking about.
It's funny because I went to a Catholic university myself, and I do have memories of sitting in on some of the radio shows that they had out there. And I remember 2 of my, classmates or whatever had their own radio show. And I remember they invited me to the radio show once and we did some stuff, but there was that notion of like, well, you can't get 2 crazy. I think they just invited me on because they knew I could do an Arnold voice, and basically that's what I did, and that was kind of, I think, if I'm remembering it correctly. But yeah, I appreciate the idea of, because it's funny because you mentioned to me tonight, you're like, oh, don't sweat it if you want to drop the F-bomb or say whatever you're going to say. Like, this is a show that's free to, basically, what do they call it on iTunes? It's like, this is an explicit show, basically. Right, exactly. So don't sweat it. But what's funny is I know sometimes I've made a conscious effort, like I'm like, oh, I'm going to be guest appearing on like a family show or a quote unquote non-explicit show, and like even then, like sometimes I listen back to it and I'm all, oh, I did it, like I didn't mean to do it and I didn't even realize I did it, but I did it, and I was like, oh well. And then what's funny is like some of those episodes, like he didn't bleep it out or anything like that, so it's kind of funny. It's almost like it was just the one time, but it's like I was pretty good for most of this show. Like I didn't do it except for that once.
Only stuck a couple in, we're okay.
Well, it's like I think there was like this one interviews, like it's like the guys that did the voice, the VA for like Pinky and the Brain, and I think they were reading the script of Pulp Fiction like Pinky and the Brain,
right?
And they were like trying to read it, but then it's like, oh, are there any kids here? And there were. So then they're like, oh, we'll have to keep it. Like basically they tried to do the scene from Pulp Fiction and keep it clean, and by the end of it, it's just like, oh, he heard it, like. Because it's kind of like, eventually you're just reading the dialogue, and it's like, of course, there's all kinds of, F-bombs and all kinds of stuff in the middle of this, Jules and Vincent Vega scene. So it's like they couldn't help but do that. And it's like interesting seeing how they tried to roll with it at first, but eventually they just, they're like, oh, sorry, Brain just said, fuck it or whatever. And you're like, well, now the cat's out of the bag. So,
Do you know what they call a quarter pounder in France, Pinky?
Yeah, it's like, that's basically what it was. Yeah, and it was funny, but it was one of those things where you're just like, oh, it's like, how long can they maintain the illusion of not sort of being adult in that scenario, And it's like, oh, oops,
Yeah, so. Exactly. Well, yeah, and they got time. I've seen a couple different ones, like I think it was the cast from Futurama was doing a comic book panel at either like San Diego or someplace like that, and they were doing the script for like Lord of the Rings or something like that, and it was priceless. Yeah, it's always cool when they get those guys up there doing that stuff. It's funny as hell.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead. Let's take a look back at wee little Derek Crabbe. When did you begin your obsession with comics? When did you first, get your first comic? Roughly, if you can guesstimate.
See, this is something I had to trace, and I did. So you'll bear with me because this is going to be this long, in-depth answer. But what I normally tell people, I think when I was writing screenplays in college and expected them to get made into big budget movies and stuff, what I had normally put as my first comic book ever was Transformers number 22. And that's basically circa late 1986. Yeah. But when I actually sort of
with the mechanic.
It is. It's got I know it's got Run Amok and Runabout and stuff like that, okay. and then I'm pretty sure. I think the mechanic for sure was in 26. So I don't know if it has hints of the mechanic. It's been a while since I've read it.
Yeah,
but it's kind of it was the kind of theme where Marvel had the covers where basically it was the 25th anniversary. So you'd see usually a facial shot of whoever it is, SpiderMan or Thor, and surrounding the borders, it was basically all the different teams and characters of the universe and everything, and it was true of the Transformers because at the time they were being published by Marvel, and that's what I usually cite as my first comic book, and basically it was that kind of thing of I think in the script I was trying to write something to the effect of, it was supposed to be a parallel to the girlfriend, the chick who had done you wrong, and it's Superion is there and he gets zapped by Circuit Breaker, and it was supposed to be hey baby, I'm here to help, I'm the Autobot, and it's he gets nailed by her anyway because she can't tell the difference between good robots and bad robots, and that was the kind of parallel I was making in the screenplay. But as far as the when I'm actually tracing it back, because it's that I think is something I bought at a Thrifties, and it was on the spinner rack. So that kind of gives me the spinner rack cred and all that kind of stuff. And like for a long time, you were either going to like Quick Stop or drugstores or whatever it was before you figured out like, oh, you mean there's a comic book shop like where you can actually buy like back issues and stuff? You're like, your mind was like blown and everything. And that's kind of around that time frame where I finally started like collecting comics, if that makes any sense. And like some of the other comics, like, it's weird. I was trying to go chronologically, but like if I go backwards and try to really trace what it was, like I kind of blame, like as far as like Wee Derek, like I kind of blame Power Records for Wee Derek's addiction to comics.
Yes.
Like the Robin meets Man Bat and the whole Neil Adams thing. I mean, I remember
Neil Adams art. Yes.
I mean, I remember having that, and I remember having Marvel Super Special number 16, which I wouldn't even know what the hell it was called, but I just looked it up because I knew we were going to talk about this. And basically what that is an adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back, and it collects, like, I think it's like Star Wars 39 to 44, and it's got all that cool Al Williamson art.
Yes.
And what I remember doing with that, and this is going to freak people out, I suppose, that are collectors, but what I remember doing with that as a kid was I remember cutting out like Luke Skywalker on the like cloud vein or whatever, and like taping it to my wall because I thought Luke Skywalker was super cool. And like I remember doing the same thing with like, I think I had like a copy of G.I. Joe number 6, and like so these are comics that are like 1980, 1982, and this is probably, I'm imagining the Power Records were re-released around that same time frame. So like those are the earliest things I can remember like having, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I was the same way, except my thing was, and if you go through my comic collection, you would think, oh wow, you've got, wait a second, this is like missing, because excuse me, because I'd pretty much do the same thing with the in-house ads. There would be like the big, huge splash for Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, and it was just such this cool thing that I just would, instead of the letters page, they had that big in-house ad. I would tear it up, and it was like my little mini posters across the room. Totally, I know exactly where you're coming from there.
Because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I did own this, but I totally destroyed it because I was like 6 years old or whatever, like, and it was just all over the place. But yeah, I mean, and I think the other stuff I'd blame it on, and this probably speaks to the whole history of comics on film thing, but I mean, I kind of blame it on like the TV and toys too, because I would say like the thing that made me a hardcore Marvel guy was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yes.
And the thing that made me a hardcore DC guy was like the Super Friends, the legendary Superpower show, Galactic Guardians, and all that was kind of in the same, it's like 83, 84, 85, like in that time frame. And I might not have been necessarily reading comic books, but I think a lot of my sort of predilections and kind of sensibilities sprang from watching those shows. And then, springing out of that, of course, the Superpowers thing had the toy line, and then, the Secret Wars comic book tie-in had the toy line. And so that's where I was exposed to like a lot of sort of, I guess you would say, maybe B or C-list characters, people that are not necessarily in the public consciousness, but then became part of my lexicon, where you're like, oh, I know who Baron Zemo is. It's like, why do you know that? It's like, because he was a Secret Wars toy, and basically, like, I think that informed my purchasing decisions later when it was like 1986 and I was starting to get into comic books, because it was like, oh, I like, Super Friends, like Superman's a cool guy. Like, what's this Man of Steel comic? Let me buy that. I like, the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars toys. I know who Daredevil is. There's a Daredevil comic book. Like, okay, let's pick that up.
Exactly.
And it was like, that was kind of how that kind of, basically rolled. And of course, it's probably after that, it's kind of like the same basic story. They had the little asterisks that told you, what comics to buy. And all of a sudden you were getting enveloped in these crossovers, whether it's like, the High Evolutionary and the Evolutionary War, or invasion, you know, and you're just like, oh wait, you know, there's this whole universe, you know, so you were totally on board for all that kind of stuff. And then I think thanks to like some of the widely produced trades and things that, you know, my parents would probably buy for me at like Walden Books or something like that, you know, you got introduced to all this cool stuff, whether it's, you know, Saga of the Swamp Thing or The Dark Knight Returns, and, you know, you just basically, you know, kept going from there, and it snowballed. So that's, I mean, you know, I guess I'm just name dropping stuff, but I mean, that's kind of the sort of quick and easy version of how I got into comics, I suppose.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, and like I said, I mean, it's pretty much the same way here. I mean, you know, I got in thanks to Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
you got a little 4-year-old, you know, TJ running around without his shirt on, growling and yelling and roaring, and, you know, of course, he's just being the Hulk. And of course, you know, the parents were, well, my mom more in particular was okay in helping me out with certain things, you know, like, you know, if I had a cape and a ski mask on, well, obviously I was Batman, and, you know, and then if, you know, I had the cape on and, you know, just regular clothes with these red galoshes, well, then I was Superman. Thank God for underoos, because then that way it was very easy to tell who I was.
It's funny. You feel like that wouldn't have a defining influence on you, but it probably does, because we all grew up with underoos, and everybody had, like, you know, like obviously some of the history of comics on film photos, you see the Superman shirt and everything that I have, which is like for a little kid, and like I think there's the picture of me in Grease that I use at the end of some of the tags, and that has like a little Hulk T-shirt and everything, and that was clearly in the heyday of Bill Bixby. I mean, that's what's weird. It's like some of the earliest comics I've owned that I still own are foreign language comics, because those to me are somehow irreplaceable treasures, like, if that makes any sense. Because it's like this reprint comic of the Incredible Hulk that's got like the wrong cover basically on it. I guess not wrong per se, but it's like it's got a cover from like the 300s, but the story is like from like 100, I don't know, 82 or something weird like that, and it's actually all written in Greek, and like that's probably what I was bought when we were in Greece then, you know, and it's like one of those things where it's like, well, that's to me, like, that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, this to me is sort of irreplaceable, you know, like that, and I never, you know, although I've purged a lot of things, of acquisitions over the years, like that's one thing that I've sort of held on to, and it's like those are the kind of things I put in the, you know, any kind of photos and different things that you know, it's like one of those things where you kind of want to, I don't know, like for the series, I mean, I don't try to do it too often, but it is nice to throw in some personal touches when you can find those photos, you know, of things where you're like, hey, look, this is, you know, maybe what I was reading back in the day, or here's a birthday party where I had, you know, Phoenix from Excalibur on the birthday cake. Like, I hope to figure out a way to put those into the narrative so that, you know, people can see like that this was something that was, you know, it was at the time, it was a big deal to you. You know, you loved it, and you know, the people around you were, you know, hopefully supportive enough that they, you know, they understood and sort of accommodated your, you know, your desires. And I think that's true of the people that I've been surrounded with and been, you know, lucky enough to have in my life. So.
Exactly. At least at a bare minimum, tolerant.
Yeah.
So okay, so you know that we got in, and you know, and Derek loves the comics, and obviously, as you've said before, you were writing screenplays in college. Were you studying? Was that your major? Was that film and television or broadcast?
Mostly it was. I mean, I had a theater arts major, so that's basically. I mean, I was sort of pursuing the acting hardcore. I mean, if you look up my name on IMDb, you'll see some minuscule credits to some things that you can actually probably watch, or I don't know. I think you can digitally download them now and stuff like that. But you know, there's some stuff out there like that. But mostly, I mean, you know, even once I graduated and everything, I mean, it was mostly theatrical type stuff. So
right. So stemming from that, what got you started doing, you know, the history of comics on film? What got you going there?
I mean, it's funny because to me, the answer is pretty simple. I mean, I sort of put it in the intro, but I mean, part of it was that I think it was at a point in my life where I knew acting wasn't going to be something that I was going to do professionally, and I wasn't going to continue with as far as a career path. But I also sort of had a yearning to do something creative still. And, James Rolfe doing his whole Monster Madness thing on Cinemassacre,
Right.
I dug the heck out of those, kind of like the way you eloquently described how you sort of got into watching my show. I mean, I feel like it's the same kind of story. It's like you sort of discover it and go, hey, this is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
He's covering all these different, movie film monsters and everything, and he's going through the decades, and I thought that was such a great thing. And it was fairly simple. He was narrating and taking clips and everything and putting them together and doing some funny bits. And I think that, to me, sort of set my mind off on, well, you know what? I could probably do this with like comic films, like, and I was like, hey, I probably own most of these already, I probably do. And then what was funny was when I compiled the list, it was like some of them I did, and then you find out things as you continued like researching and putting together the list, and you'd sit there and go, holy shit, what the hell is this?
Right.
I've never heard of it before. And so like some things, it was like old hat, like I'd seen them like 20 million times, and there was knowledge and information I could sort of pull up out of my ass and put in there, and it would be very personal, and also just something that you sort of inherently knew with your own innate experience. But a lot of things too, it'd be like, wow, this is brand new to me. I have to research, I have to like read up on some things and figure out how to convey this to an audience and show them, whatever it is that I kind of think is essential information, whether it's like a character's first appearance or, what was their defining story, things like that.
Yeah.
And, basically based on that, I mean, I think that's what's continued my effort to keep it up, because it seems like it's, educational for yourself. You basically have like these little fun projects, and, in a weird way, it's like, this is like, even though I'm not retired and I continue to work, it's almost like this is my fun retirement project as far as from maybe my acting career or something like that,
right.
Because I'm just enjoying myself and using the skills I've learned and honed, but sort of in a different medium, and hopefully people get to see that, like we're saying, through the magic of social media, basically.
Right. Now, the one thing that I know is like when I first started watching, there was, I think, maybe like the first 18 episodes or so that were on YouTube. And then you've got a lot of them that are being fed through, and I can't remember specifically the site that it's going through right now.
Like right now it's on Zipcast. I mean, I guess that's an interesting story. Like basically, I think originally when they were on YouTube, I think I was operating under the whole like 15 minutes or less dynamic, because, to be perfectly honest, I know there's a lot of talk about, fair use and this and that and all these kind of social movements. But I mean, I'll be perfectly upfront. Like, I don't own any of this shit. It's not really mine, and I kind of know that. So, as far as YouTube goes, I'm kind of impressed that people like that could have made money and had a, I guess, a livelihood doing that, as long as they have. But as far as like what happened was, originally most of them were on YouTube, and then I noticed that Blip TV existed, and that was a pretty great resource. I mean, a lot of people did make their livelihood releasing videos on Blip TV. I did not, but I mean, as far as like the medium that it offered, it was, not limited to 15 minutes. And at that point, I was kind of like, well, that's great. I can actually, if I wanted to make a video that was longer than 15 minutes, I could. And here I was thinking, oh, well, great. If it runs over a minute or two, I'll be okay. And what ended up happening as a result of that was, I made these things that were like an hour long, or 30 minutes long and stuff like that. And at that point, I think I stopped operating under the idea of I was going to make these short little, 7 to 10 minute videos. And if I wanted to take my sweet ass time and, make an hour long video on the Incredible Hulk, it was perfectly fine,
Right. And really delved into it. Yeah.
Most of those were on Blip TV for the longest time, and then I guess the downfall of Blip TV was, I guess it got bought by Maker Studios, which is like somehow tied to YouTube and all this other stuff. And basically at some point it was like there was a big purge. And like what was funny was I think we had a Blip TV channel for Fanholes. We had a Blip TV channel for another side project that we do, which doesn't have a lot of videos, called Retrovirus. And I had it for History of Comics on Film. Mm-hmm. Now, on the first giant purge, where I think like a bunch of people, from really popular sites were getting cut from Blip TV, it's like the one thing that was kind of nice was, obviously we were sad that the Fanholes and the Retrovirus got cut in that initial cut. Mm-hmm. But one thing I was sort of proud of or happy about was even through that whole first purge, like somebody must have been a fan of my show over at Blip TV because it survived like the first purge. So, it was on Blip TV until they shut it down.
Right.
So, and when that eventually shut down, it was kind of like, okay, well, I don't know what all these other alternatives can be. I was wondering if I should go back to YouTube. What I noticed about that was, and I guess getting back to the whole fair use thing, I did upload a bunch of videos thinking, well, as a backup, when Blip TV finally goes down, maybe I will. I think I made them all private. And then my idea was if Blip went down, maybe I'd just make them public and keep going on YouTube. But even privately, they're, I guess, automated algorithm flagged a bunch of them.
Oh, so they did come after you then.
Yeah, and so at that point, I was just kind of like, I guess I was kind of either stubborn or whatever, but it was like one of those things where it sort of pissed me off. And I was like, well, if it's going to be this much trouble when I make them private, like imagine what's going to happen if I make them public. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I think I got pissed and I deleted everything I uploaded and was like, I'm just going to find some other place to do it. And that ended up being Zipcast. And I know it's not like the greatest of solutions, but at this point, nobody's threatening to take the videos down or right. do anything wacky. And the worst thing that happens is sometimes it's a little difficult to upload the videos because it's really not the same type of operation as YouTube. Right. So, sometimes you get a little frustrated and eventually the video gets up there, but, invariably it's kind of like, if you want the video up there on day X, something's going to break and you're not going to be able to upload it, so it's like you basically, it gets up there when it gets up there.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, I hope people can watch them there if they need to, and that it's not too much of a pain in the ass. But for right now, like that's basically how they're getting it released.
Yeah, and well, I was watching, obviously, you know who James Rolfe is, and I was watching the Angry Joe review. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm familiar.
And he went on a tirade about the YouTube pulling and shutting the videos down and the whole fair use thing. And as it turns out, there was only like maybe two companies, like Sony and one other one, that was really doing it. He had contacted several of the other companies like Capcom and I'm trying to think. Other companies that they were saying that they were having these copyright claims on, and they said no, we never filed anything on those. We didn't do anything. So it was basically YouTube's algorithm that was doing that whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. Yeah.
So and to that end, from what I've been hearing, they are trying to make the appropriate changes on that, and I really hope they do, because when it comes to the fair use, the big key thing, and because of the comic books that we do and all that stuff with copyright, fair use, and how all that works, someone like yourself, it shouldn't affect, because you're commenting on the properties. You are, having a dialogue and a commentary about the properties. You're not, trying to say that these are, I wrote and directed and owned the Vigilante serial from 1942. So I think that's something that YouTube, as they're trying, and I really hope that this is true, that they are really trying to get that, worked out, so that, like here again, we can get you back up on YouTube. That type of thing, where there was, that bigger market. Your show definitely deserves, as big an audience as possible. It's just, it's too damn good not to.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel weird about it because I've had debates and talks with friends about it. My fellow podcasters and stuff. And I don't know. Like fair use seems like such a gray thing, And I don't intend to make any money off of this. It's just I want people to see it. But I do kind of find it funny when, like I said, people are considering the making of the videos their livelihood and then get mad when that gets taken away. And I am kind of thinking, well, you didn't, I didn't shoot the Vigilante serial. Like you said, I don't own it. I don't know. I think it feels funny to me in certain regards. And I feel hesitant to, say without a doubt, all the work I've ever done is fair use. Cause I don't know, and I think it's kind of a gray area. I mean, as far as being on YouTube and more people seeing me, if I could post videos on YouTube and they wouldn't flag the videos, I would do it. Right. But I expect to be flagged, and if that's the case, I'd much rather let, as lazy as it sounds, I'd much rather let other people fight that battle and kind of just go ahead and post whatever to Zipcast when I can. And if people want to watch them, they can do it.
Exactly. No, I hear you there. So, well, okay. So, obviously you pretty much answered the question there as far as, research and all that type of stuff. When you're going through, or I guess I should say when you went through, and, you were making the catalog of the various serials, movies, what have you, that were coming out, from 39-ish forward. How were you finding those ones that was it all pretty much just, searching on the internet and trying to find everything through there? Or was it a case of, talking to people at conventions? Or, how were you getting that research to find out all of these, hard to find shows? I never knew there was a Vigilante serial. I never knew there was a Blackhawk serial until... I think
it's a combination of things. I mean, because there were things where I think I knew about some of the serials. I mean, some things that are obvious. I think I had the VHS tapes. It was like a double tape set of the Captain America serial. Certain ones I had, and then as far as the Vigilante, I mean, that's thanks to the magic of the interwebs. You know what I mean? And there are certain things like that where you're I didn't realize, certain things existed at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, some things were, I think, I'm trying to remember. I think there's a place called Cereal Bowl, I believe is what it's called. And I remember, I think that's where I got the Blackhawk cereal from, I'm pretty sure. Okay. And probably some other ones, I think Thundar and Congo Bill, I think I would credit to Cereal Bowl. And so there are certain, kind of, quote unquote bootleg outlets, whether, maybe, I don't know if those guys go around to cons and stuff like that, but, in the old days, you'd always see we always joke about it on Fanholes when we used to watch, what I like to call the asswipe, subtitled anime and stuff, where you get these VHS tapes that, had copies. They're labeled in red pen, and you just, it's 23 to 27, and you watch 5 episodes, and it's this grainy, fifth generation dupe of a VHS or a laser disc or whatever the hell it is, and you're just trying to enjoy it that way. And I mean, there were certainly those for, I remember always seeing Legends of the Superheroes playing at conventions, at those guys' booth, where they had the little TV set with the VHS at the bottom. Yep. And they bring those to all the cons and everything and play the Star Wars Holiday Special or whatever ungodly thing. And you look at it and go, what the fuck is this? Yeah. And that kind of stuff. So, I mean, otherwise, there were resources, I think, that I had. I mean, where I remember there were folks that I made friends with on different social media sites, and there were some people that were much better at keeping track of things than I was, and I sort of used those sites, as a resource. And what's unfortunate is, some of those sites don't exist anymore, or they've been migrated to, online books. Like I suppose if I'm pimping other people, like there's a guy named Will Rogers, and he's got what is now like an online book on Amazon called The Ultimate Super Friends Guide. But originally, that was this awesome Super Friends website. So like if you were like, dude, like, you know, when did Mistleplick show up in which episodes, you know, and you could go there and be like, oh, bam, 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 it's these three, you know, or you know, when did the Phantom Zone criminals all show up? And if you just wanted to do a quick refresher for yourself and you didn't have it like committed to memory. So there was that. There were people on like these old school, I guess now it must be a defunct site, but there were these old school, like, you know, torrent sites where it was like, I'm trying to remember what they were called, but it was like for like basically like film buffs where you could find like these, you know, Italian versions of movies or like, you know, long 4-hour cuts of whatever it was. And, you know, oftentimes you'd run into stuff like that where, you know, and there's still stuff out there where if I could go back and do like an episode 16.5 or something, I mean, there's still like Archie pilots that I've never seen that I know supposedly exist.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff like that where it'd be nice if I could, you know, come across those, because a lot of times it's funny because there were points where I thought those bootleg type sellers got really, it was funny because I had gone away from LA for a little while and come back up to the Bay Area, but I still visited people on occasion, and I went out there for a few weddings and everything. Mm-hmm. And I had remembered there was this comic shop, I think, I'm trying to remember what the name was, but I think it was like Redondo Beach-ish comic shop or whatever. And you know, it was an okay store. And what I noticed was they had a whole wall of basically like bootleg, you know, type tapes, or at this point, you know, DVDs and stuff like that. And at one point I see this disc, and it's got like, you know, I don't know, like the Shadow pilot from the 50s, and I don't know, like the Yvonne Craig Batgirl thing, and then it says Archie and something else. And all I wanted to know was like, is this the one from 64? Because I have that one.
Right.
Or is this the one from 62? Because it's the one from 62, I'll buy it from you. And I think, I can't remember what it was, but it just pissed me off because it was like they just couldn't bother to, they didn't care. Yeah. Like, it was just like, I don't know, I don't care, I don't want your money. Like, you're irrelevant. And it was just one of those things where it's like, well, if you don't want my money and it's irrelevant, then you're not going to tell me the answer, then I won't buy anything. You know, like, and you know, so I mean, that's how that ended. But I mean, you know, and what's funny is a lot of people sometimes are just super curious about like those kind of rarities, because like some of those things, like I think the Archie stuff was always for me the hardest to do and research, because one, like, except for like some of the Filmation stuff that was like officially released on DVD, mm-hmm. there's a lot of it out there that has never been put out on DVD. And on top of that, like, I'm not an Archie expert. Like, I have learned a lot about Archie just doing this project. And it was like, that was one of those things where I was like, hey, you know what? This will be interesting. Like, because to be honest, like, it's like when I started, the most experience I had with Archie, which I have fond memories of because I'm an 80s kid, is I liked the new Archie show. And I remember watching it on like Saturday mornings or something. Right. But other than that, like, I didn't know too much. I knew my mom liked reading the Archie comics and stuff like that, and that was about it. And so it was kind of like, oh, you know what? This has been, you know, like reading like early Pep comics and seeing like Archie was kind of like a buck-toothed, like, goofball, you know, like, because it was like, you kind of think like, oh man, you know, isn't Archie like sort of like this handsome guy who wears his little Letterman's jacket and has these two hot chicks like fighting over him? Yeah. And when you first see him, he just looks kind of like, almost like he's like alfalfa but with red hair or something.
Say like a descendant of Lampwick.
yeah, and it was just kind of like one of those like head trips where you're like, oh, you know, you've come so far, you know, Arch, you know, or whatever, you know, and so definitely like for stuff like that. I mean, you know, just to answer wrap up the answer to the question, I mean, basically, if I can get anything official, I'll get it, you know, like, and some great reasons for that have been like the Warner Brothers, like, made on demand stuff. I mean, those guys have all been great about, I mean, you know, they released the Legends of the Superheroes, for God's sake. I mean, like, they're not really like ashamed of any of the content or anything, and they seem to find ways to release things. I mean, obviously, you know, I'd hope that Shout Factory would get the license to release a lot more Marvel stuff, but I mean, they have released certain things, whether it's like the Red Brown Captain America films and things like that. So, you know, like as far as official channels, like there's great stuff like that. You know, at one point, Marvel.com did a really good job of hosting like a lot of different shows and cartoons, whether it was like the Japanese SpiderMan tokusatsu or like the Incredible Hulk TV series from the 90s, the animated one. And they used to have all that stuff up there. So, I mean, that for me was always a great resource, you know, as far as, you know, something that is, you know, officially official and stuff like that.
Well, you know, and Marvel and DC, kind of speaking on that a little bit, Marvel and DC need to hurry up and get off their ass and give us like an official DVD or Blu-ray release of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and the Incredible Hulk series from that same time.
See, I'm kind of scared about that because, like, it was bad enough when Disney just had the rights to the animated stuff, but now they own the whole kit and caboodle. And, like, I'm still worried, and these shows are horrible, by the way, but I'm still worried I'm never going to see, like, a DVD series of, like, Hulk and the Agents of Stupid, you know, like, or like, this current Avengers Assemble thing, which I complain about ad nauseum, but still subject myself to, you know, like, and it's like one of those things where I'm like, even the new stuff isn't, I mean, really getting, I mean, the way I bought Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the Avengers show, which I think is one of the best animated Marvel things that have come out in a long time, is I had to get, I don't know what the hell they are. They're like freaking Canadian Blu-rays or whatever they are. Like, I mean, I had to import them.
Really?
You know? And it's like they're, I mean, if you look them up, like, I don't know how much they are now. I mean, who knows? They may be ungodly by now. But I mean, I remember I paid a pretty hefty sum for them at the time. Like, I mean, if you think normally, like, you're, oh yeah, Blu-ray, $20, I probably paid like, you know, 35 or 40 for one set. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, you know, what grand total you're talking about, like maybe $80 and Canadian shipping for two, you know, seasons of a show, but it's a great show. It's on Blu-ray. Like, I was like, I'm not going to not get this, but I'm sitting there shocked. Like, how come they were only released on DVD and in these little meek ass, you know, sets with like 5 episodes or whatever it was, you know, and it's like those kind of things. Like, I always kind of freak out about. Like, I'm sitting there hoping, like, you know, Warner Made on Demand at some point will like release the Filmation Shazam cartoon and things like that before I get to it, because you know, some of my copies of that are pretty piss poor.
Where's my superhero high? Wasn't that the one that was called with where you had the Shazam
the hero high,
because like the main good guy like flew around on a surfboard, if I remember correctly. Captain California was his name.
That actually has an official DVD release, believe it or not. So that's at least that part of it's taken care of. That's pretty much the cleanest footage of Captain Marvel that I have, because I have the Hero High DVDs, but the rest of it is not so hot. So.
And of course all the Filmation, you know, contract players, you know, every time you're like, no, that's He-Man, that's not, you know, whichever hero, that's John Irwin. So, as I'm going through here looking at, so, and you know, as we talk about, you know, the different properties and all that type of stuff, as you're going through and you're picking, you know, the various shows that you would want to cover, shows that you would, you know, or you know, TV or film that you want to do. Are you planning, or have you thought this far ahead yet? Would you be including properties where, you know, toys became comics, became TV and film? You know, like G.I. Joe, Transformers. You know,
the strict answer, as far as the list goes, is no. The more politic answer is I have done separate series on, like, things like the Green Hornet and the Lone Ranger. And at some point I did sort of conceive or at least contemplate like, ooh, what if I did like just a separate series on like the Defenders of the Earth and go through all those things, and that would sort of bring me back to the whole serials and black and white stuff again if I wanted to. But I mean, as far as like it's funny, like obviously I'm a huge fan of Transformers and I'm a pretty huge fan of G.I. Joe, and that is probably best reflected on a lot of my podcasting work and everything like that. But as far as like actually covering them on video, I probably would say probably no. Like it's funny when you ask that question. What was funny to me was, and this is again, thank you Warner Made on Demand, but I know it's ridiculous because I think G.I. Joe and Transformers are so ingrained in my nature. Like I don't even think of them like because they're so part of my existence, I guess. But when I read your question, I was like, no, I'm not covering the Centurions. Like, I like the cartoon, but I'm not going to be covering it on History of Comics on Film. And it was like one of those things where I was like, oh no, he's probably going to ask me about like G.I. Joe and Transformers. And it's like one of those things where it's like, I love those shows. Like, I mean, but I don't think, I don't know, like I guess, of course, they're my ridiculous rules, and I reserve the right to change them at any given time.
Well,
but
sure.
the way I always kind of like, because some people would always ask me kind of not what you're asking, but about like comic strips. And I think that was something else that was very much like, no, I'm not really going to do the Phantom per se. I'm not going to really talk about Conan per se. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because to me, I was thinking, well, what was a comic book first and then became adapted? Mm-hmm. And I sort of go off of it. Most of my rules fit that. The only thing I've made that doesn't fit that rule, and it's because, I'm like, I can reserve the right to change it, was ISIS. And ISIS, strictly speaking, was never a comic book before it was that Filmation live action show.
Right.
But because it had such close ties to DC Comics, and it basically was the sister show to that live action Captain Marvel series on, that Filmation made, I'm like, well, I was like, I gotta do both of them. I mean, it would be stupid to do one and not the other.
Right.
And that was just my take on it. I mean, I guess people could point at and kind of wonder, what the hell I was thinking when I decided to cover Battle Fever J. But I think that's also because, to me, I think it fits that rule of Captain America was a comic first, and even though it's like the craziest adaptation of Captain America that has nothing to do with Captain America that you've ever seen, like I still, to me, in my head, I'm still like, well, it came from Captain America, so that's what I'm going with. Sure. That's sort of the story I'm sticking to. But I think for other things like that, like I said, there's no reason to rule it out completely. But I think if I ever did do something like that, if I ever did do, the Centurions episode of History of Comics on Film, it would be, something like the Green Hornet or the Lone Ranger project, where I might do like, a separate thing where, I present it and it's part of the History of Comics on Film, but not part of like the main, I guess, show line or whatever.
Right. So kids, even though it's coming up, don't rule out the History on Comics episode of the Tarzan, Zorro, and Lone Ranger Power Hour.
Well, that Lone Ranger retrospective I did does.
Yeah, what was that? Was it Ranger Palooza? Was that what it was called? Or
yeah. So that actually has Zorro gets briefly mentioned, but most of it was focused on the actual Lone Ranger episodes.
Right. Yeah, no, like I said, I remember I was watching that because I think it was coming out right around when you were doing that, right, for the Army Hammer Johnny Depp.
Yeah. It's funny, like both those projects, I was like trying to get all like psyched up and everything, and man, both those movies were fucking shit, weren't they? It was just one of those things where you're all like, yeah, and then I'm going to cover the movie. No, never mind. It was just like, all right, I'm done now.
I didn't think the movie
all
was
that
too
other stuff was fun, but not this.
I didn't think the movie was too bad, but I remember I was able to. I took my dad to it, and in 37, 38 years of life, this was the first time I had ever actually gone to a movie with my dad. He's one of those old school guys, born in 48. He's, oh, no, you don't need to spend all that money on a goddamn movie. You can watch it in a couple months on the TV, that type of thing. but I knew it was a Western, so I knew I'd be able to get him in on it. I knew I could sell him on that. It was the Lone Ranger, and he was in. We got out of the movie theater, and he looks at me, he goes, "He didn't tell me it was going to be a goddamn comedy." And I says, "Well, Dad, you know."
Yeah, nobody told me either, Dad. Nobody told me either.
So of the 63, plus the .5s, plus the Ranger project, which one, up to this point, which one's kind of been your favorite one to work on, research on? What's been the one that really either got you all hyped up, or it just really had the it factor for you?
I think the one I'm most proud of to date is the one on the SpiderMan, like the Japanese tokusatsu one. Like, I had a lot of fun doing it. I was a little nervous putting it together, and I think I showed it to some people that I consider like. This is weird for me to say because it's weird. When I was a kid, I think, we were talking about like some of the first comics ever and everything. And obviously based on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, like right around that same 1986 time frame, when I was buying G.I. Joe and Transformers, the next thing I immediately glommed onto were all the Spider-Man comics. I think at the time it was like Amazing, Web, and Spectacular. So I have distinct memories of glomming onto those immediately. And for a long time, I would say, like, between Marvel characters, aside from the Silver Surfer, like, Peter Parker as Spider-Man, especially in that black outfit from Secret Wars, like, that was my guy. And, like, even though I was trying to, like, hook up with girls at, like, the prom or whatever in middle school at these dances, I still in the back of my head thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could get out of this, like, prom suit and just, like, walk up on walls and like do all this kind of shit and that's kind of like where my head was at for a long time. So for a long time I felt like some sort of sense of proprietorship, but I felt like somewhere along the way with the comics and all this other kind of stuff, like I sort of gave up ownership of it, like in a way where I consider other people more authoritative on Spider-Man than myself. And showing that to some of those people and them saying, dude, that clip you put in there where he talks to the old man, like that was good, man. That was Spider-Man right there. And like, and it made me feel good about it because I know sometimes I get a little opinionated about certain things, like how I think things should be and how I see them and what my vision of, Superman is or my version of Spider-Man is. And so, obviously I'm not going to sugarcoat it when I make the video, but I maybe at least try to be a little diplomatic and try to, sort of cover all the bases, I guess. And I think in that sense, like, I hope that anybody who didn't know about it before was like, wow, like this is not exactly what I thought. And I hope they sort of can appreciate an alternate take on Spider-Man. Because I think that's probably the easiest thing to sort of blow off if you're, maybe thinking about, well, I know all about Spider-Man. Well, maybe you don't know about this Spider-Man.
Did you know about the time that Spider-Man was, running around fighting in a giant mech?
yeah, exactly. So it's like that kind of, and I guess in some ways it's like it's fun because we've got like the podcast where we talk about Sentai and Tokusatsu as well. So it's like I think in that sense, like I think that's another fun discovery for me where there, I've been dipping my toe into it, and it's like, I think Marvel, in general, having those shows and then I think combined with things like, the Super Sentai being tied in with Power Rangers and all that other kind of stuff, that kind of snowballs into like a whole other sort of fandom, and so it's like that, and it's one of those things where, like everything else, it's like, I know people for years were trying to get me to watch Doctor Who, and I'm like, no, fuck you, I'm not watching this fucking shit, and eventually, they get you to watch it, and then you're like, okay, well now I'm watching all this stuff, and it's like, it's kind of the same thing with the Tokusatsu, people, I was like, for years, I was like, no, I'm not going to watch this Kamen Rider stuff, like, because it's too much history, too much stuff, I got these comics to read, and it's like, so, but but now you're like enveloped in all these other, fandoms and everything. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, they're all very entertaining, and I don't regret that I sort of stumbled into them, or that people sort of twisted my arm, or grabbed me by the ear and made me, watch some of these things,
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, and as you were talking about, like the Super J and the Sentai and all that type of stuff, I was, and now that you've actually clarified your rules, I'm not as surprised, but I was actually surprised you didn't cover Gotcha Man or Battle of the Planets. But, like I said, you've laid out the rules and, and all that. So I completely understand why that wasn't covered. So with SpiderMan being the one that you're really proud of at this point, and I think I have a good guess, but I want to hear it from you. Which one do you sit there and as you were watching it, reviewing it, doing all the stuff for it, which one is the one that you sit there and say, my God, why am I doing this?
I think it's a tie, because I thought of two immediately, and this is no reflection on the actual comics or content, but the two series I thought of immediately was, I can't stand that Hop Harrigan cereal. I mean, it's not good. I mean, it's supposed to be about a dude who's like a daring aviator, and it's just not. It's not about that at all. It's this cheap, cereal where, it's like, I think it's one of those Catsman cereals where it was made low budget, and, they drive around in cars and stuff. Yeah, and come on, man. This is not what I was expecting, and again, it's no reflection on the actual, all-American comics and things that Hop Harrigan has showed up in. I mean, obviously those are very different, and they don't have the restraints of having a budget, Right. So that for sure, I think is if basically if you're going to tell me what's the worst, movie serial you've ever seen, it's well, for me, I'm kind of Hop Harrigan's kind of up there, because it's not, it's overall sort of disappointing. And then I think based on your guess, you may be happy to learn that I think the other TV show I thought of, and it's not quite Archie's fault, but Archie TV Funnies was one of those ones where I did kind of look back and go, God, what the fuck is this? What am I, because it's funny because they're at the TV station, and they're basically the framework. And the show's not even about Archie. It's basically they animated a bunch of comic strips. And in some weird way, I felt like this almost violates my protocol. I don't want to talk about these fucking comic strips. And it's I got no problem with the comic strips, but it's just I don't know, it just wasn't my, Broomhilda and I'm trying to think of Nancy and Sluggo and all this stuff, and I'm just kind of this is not exactly. I mean, the one I tied into the most, which I didn't mind talking about, was the Dick Tracy one, because you're Dick Tracy's kind of up there. I mean, he had the big budget movie, which wasn't that hot shit, but you were I know who Dick Tracy is. I've read Dick Tracy comics. I get it. There's cool things about Dick Tracy, but again, going back to my strict rules, it's Dick Tracy is not something I'd cover because I consider it a comic strip and not a comic book.
Right.
And that's kind of where I draw the line, because I was just Jesus, if I did strips, you'd be here all day, And I was I'm going to focus on the comic books, because I think that even though there's some wacky stuff that shows up every once in a while where you're I think even seeing into the far-flung future, the one thing I've always dreaded is I'm doing the Archie stuff. You know what this means, right? And I've got this plastic sealed wrapped 7 seasons of Melissa Joan Hart as Sabrina the Teenage Witch that I've never cracked open, and I just bought it because it was on sale, and I'm one of these days I'm going to watch 7 seasons of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I'm just I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I imagine at some point that's going to be a likelihood. So it's one of those things where I'm some of those things, I guess you'll deal with when you get to them.
It's either going to result in an alcohol poisoning or an overdose.
Something. Yeah.
So, and Owen, by the way, my guess, and I was completely wrong, I was going to say Legend of the Superheroes.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's that's that's like the Star Wars holiday special for DC Comics.
Right.
But I mean, at least I could sit here and go, well, look, they got Adam West and Burt Ward. I mean, how many specials can say like, dude, we have a live action version of Solomon Grundy? I mean, not too many, right? I mean, it's like there's things about it that I still, even as tough as it is, like that I kind of find charming.
And Charlie Callis as Sinestro.
Yeah, there you go. So.
Well, as we start looking to the future, you got your next one coming up, the Plastic Man. What, maybe like say within the next, year or two cycle, as far as, 1980, 81, 82, what property are you looking most forward to, getting to? What one are you really looking at saying, yeah, I can't wait to sink my teeth into this guy?
There's probably a couple, but I mean, in general, like I'm sort of excited to be leaving the 70s, like, and getting into the 80s, because I think the 80s is my jam. I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, we sort of discussed when I fell into comics, and it falls right around there. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of the shows, I mean, I've already mentioned like the whole, superpower stuff. So that one is kind of a given. Like that would be, I think that was exciting for me just in general, even when I wasn't working on this project, because you watched it on Saturday mornings and then it went away for a little while. And I remember being in college and then finding out that Cartoon Network was actually airing those again. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, dude, I know this is weird, but parents, you have to record these for me, and I need to see them when I come home. Like that kind of thing, where it's like I need to see Firestorm and his like combable flame hair, like when I come home, please. Like and that in and of itself is like. For me, that's pretty exciting. I think I'd also probably single out like the Ruby Spears Superman cartoon, because I really do like that a lot, and maybe like the Swamp Thing movie, because I think a lot of people have said their piece on it in various podcasts and stuff, and I'm kind of looking forward to sort of conveying my love for the character, hopefully in terms of covering that film, the first film.
And Adrian Barbeau.
Yeah.
Well, right on. So, let's go ahead, and kind of stay in, continuing the comic books and the films type things. The modern day type stuff, the current Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC Universe, all the stuff that's going on right now. What are your thoughts on that? How are you feeling, as far as like Marvel, what Marvel's doing and what DC is doing with the properties?
I feel like this is like one of those hot button questions that I run away from like the hills. But like, the simple answer is I enjoy going to see comic films. I mean, I make videos based on comic to film adaptations. So even if it totally sucks, I'm always curious on how it's done. As far as like modern type stuff, most of that stuff I go to the theater to see. Mm-hmm. Most of it. Like, I mean, usually, like, depending on what my work schedule was, at certain times I was working like late night swing shifts, so I couldn't do the whole, day of, middle of the night thing. Right. But at this point, like, my schedule's pretty open for all that kind of stuff. So now that I have the time and the availability to do it, like, Civil War, I was there Thursday night, and had a little reserved seat or whatever, and went and watched that. As far as the same thing with Batman v Superman, I was there the opening night and went out and watched that. So as far as like recent stuff, it's like I'll go and watch whatever it is. I mean, as far as like what my likes and dislikes are, I mean, There, most of that stuff I generally enjoy. I mean, but there's, certain things I can nitpick, and certain things I feel like it's good that I have, I don't know, umpty years before I get there to discuss them in a video, because I'll have time to sort of put together my complete unadulterated feelings about whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, the Marvel stuff, I think, has been, like most people are pretty happy with it. I mean, it seems to be a crowd pleaser and everybody's pretty content with it. I mean, the worst thing people can say is if you're a fan of, say, the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, you're a little kind of bummed out that now your property is getting the short end of the shrift because it's owned by, Fox, or at least those rights are tied up with Fox at any rate. As far as the DC stuff, being probably like a DC comic book fan first before a Marvel comic book fan, you're always sort of fighting the whole, Marvel's better, dude, like stigma that you're always going to be fighting for like the rest of your life.
Right.
So there's that aspect to it. So, I mean, sometimes I'm hard pressed to lay into, a DC movie the same way maybe that I would be to somebody who has a bunch of, but I mean, it's not really fair. I mean, I think I try to treat things as equally. It's like one of those things where I think, like, say, for example, Batman is a DC character who's had a lot of great movies. So when The Dark Knight Rises came out, and I thought it was kind of stupid, I didn't feel bad about it. It's just like, look, man, I didn't like that movie, but that's okay because there are a bunch of other movies that he's been in, that he's had, that are really good. But, when it comes down to like the old school days when it was the 70s and you only had the one Captain America movie, it's like that's the joke they always say. It's like you sort of had to love the red, brown Captain America movie because it's like, that's all we had, man. And it's like now you can kind of go, oh, well, look, you got all these 3 great, Chris Evans films, and you don't have to like feel shoehorned into it. Meanwhile, you feel the plight of like the poor fucking Green Lantern fan who only has that one fucking movie. So It's like you can't really blow it a new asshole because that's the only one, and it's like so I sort of feel that plight. I mean, at the same time though, I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest Jonah Hex comic book fans you'll ever find. But man, that movie is an atrocious piece of shit, and there's no denying it, so I don't know, I have lots of feelings about the Marvel and DC cinematic stuff, and sometimes there's sometimes there are good things where I'm like, dude, this movie kicked so much ass. They got everything great. Like I love the way they adapted it, or I really enjoyed the film or whatever. And occasionally there's movies where you're like, I mean, some of them I just think, this was okay. This was, I sometimes people are so hell-bent. It's either got to be like the greatest thing ever or it totally sucks. But like some films, it's like, they're just, they're all right. Like they were entertaining. They did what they were supposed to do, but it's not gonna change the world or anything, and they're just, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not, if you've heard the show, I'm not too worried about hot button topics or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, just for my money, I think the Marvel's done it right, by introducing the individual characters and letting us really get the connection with them first, and then do the Avengers movie. Whereas DC is just and Warner is just so. Oh my God, we got to play catch up, that they're just rushing to the Justice League. And that's really the only main concern that I've got.
Well, no, that's a very valid concern. I mean, you've got it on the notes about the DC Cinematic Universe, and my thought is, well, I'll believe it when I see it, because we haven't really. I mean, they're trying it. I mean, it's one of those things where I just. It's like they when they listed those slates of films, it was like one of those things where you're like, are you really sure there's going to be a Cyborg movie in like 2019? Like, are you sure? But you know what's funny is I was afraid back in like whatever it was, 2008, when they started linking Iron Man to that Ed Norton Hulk film, and I thought to myself, man, what if people hate this Thor movie? Like, what if people hate this Captain America movie? Right. How are they going to do the Avengers movie if those movies tank? And, luckily, neither of them did. And then, it sprawled into this, billion-dollar franchise, right? Yeah, and like, that's great. Like, I'm pleased at that. But, I mean, I can't say I didn't have the same fears back then about that. And maybe, obviously, maybe one is more warranted, one fear is more warranted than the other. But I mean, at this point, I think I would tend to agree with what you're saying. I mean, that there is a rush to play catch up as far as that goes. I mean, the thing that I would point to is, maybe, which I don't know if I really understand why there has to be such a division, but I mean, I've enjoyed the whole DC television universe,
yes,
for lack of a better term, so it's like, I mean, I have different opinions about some of the different shows and everything, but I mean, for the most part, like, that's something that is a highlight for me, where I'm like, and sometimes I think it's too bad, like, that they couldn't, synchronize the two, but and in some ways I'm kind of understanding of why they don't want to synchronize the two as well, but, it's, I guess it is what it is, so, I mean, I think I'll look forward to the films, but, I mean, there's certain things where, I guess, obviously, most people feel like Marvel's this solid brand and potentially they can do no wrong. And for the most part, I guess that's true. I think there have been some cases where I've gone to a movie and been like, what the fuck? But for the most part, I'd say, of, whatever it is now, the 15 odd movies and umpty-ump TV series that have come out recently, I think it's far and few between where I'm kind of down on it. Most of them I'm usually pretty positive, or at least everything falls into that okay status for me.
Right. Well, and like you said, you had your concerns as far as, like, people are going to hate Thor, people are going to hate Captain America. My concern was when they started doing the Phase 2. I'm sitting there thinking, you're doing a Guardians of the Galaxy movie?
See, that's
you're bringing
for me.
Ant-Man? What?
Yeah. For me, like, I guess that's how hardcore I am into it. It was like one of those things where, for me, it's like, I get that the mass public is like, what the fuck is Guardians of the Galaxy? But for me, it's like, I get made fun of because I like the old Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I like
early
27
guys,
Advance Astro.
before. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, these properties are not as well known. And then they say, well, we're going to be using the Scott Lang Ant-Man versus the Hank Pym Ant-Man, and at that point in time, my geek mind just went on a freaking rampage. But then they turned out to be great movies, and everybody
the Ant-Man and Guardians were movies that I was definitely pleased with. Yeah.
And really, when it comes to the synchronizing of the DC, let's really hope and pray that Crisis on Infinite Earths movie, puts the nail in that coffin. Well, all right. Well, we'll go ahead here. Do you have any major upcoming projects or anything? You've got the Fanholes podcast. Where can people, if they're interested, catch you for the Fanholes podcast?
Fanholes podcast is on normally released weekly, different type of shows on a weekly basis at fanholespodcast.blogspot.com.
Okay.
We're on Stitcher and iTunes if you want to try to find us that way. And then History of Comics on Film is on Zipcast right now, but probably the easiest way to get to it is on the Blogspot, which is hocof.blogspot.com. And I know, I'm not sure if you've checked this out or not, but sort of a sister-related show, both to Fanholes and History of Comics on Film, is a series that's titled Retrovirus, and that is on the video version of it is on Zipcast. There's a blog spot, and basically what that was an attempt to adapt blog posts of reviews of B movies that my fellow fanhole Justin had created, and I thought they were really cool, and I wanted to make like a video version of them. So between me and him, we kind of switched narrating here and there, but we sort of crafted the quote-unquote character of the doctor professor, and basically he narrates most of the videos and everything like that. But I mean, yeah, I know you were asking about like certain like toys and cartoons and things like that. Like some of that conceivably could also fall into that purview as well, because there were a lot of B movies that we covered, based on his blog posts and everything. But eventually it sort of dovetailed into, like, I think the last couple videos were on the Filmation Star Trek series, and I did kind of I guess it's like my homage or my nod to the Nostalgia Critic or whatever. But it's like I did a review of the first 3-parter of RoboCop Alpha Commando, and it was just like it's kind of like you talk about like, God, why am I watching this? Like, I mean, that entire show is pretty much like, God, why am I watching this? So like, and I felt the need to share that with people, but not, in a sort of history of comics on film sense, but with a little more kind of humor applied to it.
Right.
So,
Right on. Well, I mean, at this point, do you have any other projects coming up? Anything else? Do you have a date for the Plastic Man episode?
I'm hoping to release something new, or at least get a new video done by June. I mean, my main goal at this point is to be done with the 70s by the end of the year. That's my hope. Like, I can't like commit to it, but that's what I hope for.
Right.
I know it's basically like Plastic Man, Spider-Woman, and then the World's Greatest Super Friends. And I've actually already written and produced, like, basically the Captain America 2 Death Too Soon, that's in the can. Like, I did that when I did the first, like, I kind of did it like, Superman and Superman 2. Like,
right.
Like I basically produced them both at the same time, and it's just basically waiting for me to finish those other 3 videos so I can release it. So hopefully it's not going to be too long of a wait, but at this point, like, to be perfectly honest, like, I'm barely in the pre-production stage on that.
Sure.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said, I mean, I'm enough of a fan. Once you make, if you make any announcement, if you share any announcement, I'll make sure I let people know too, because like I said, I'm a huge fan of the history on comics, and yeah, you've got easy, cheap promotion coming from me. So,
thanks, man. No, I totally appreciate that.
All right. Well, kids, coming up in November is Doctor Strange. But I'll tell you what, this guy, he's already covered Doctor Strange from 1978. Okay? This is the guy right here. Go check it out. History of Comics on film, fan holes, retrovirus, get all of that. It's all in the blog spots there. And I'll make sure that I post the links up as well, so you guys can make sure to check it out. Once again, Derek Crabbe, dude, thank you so much for your time, man. It was really great talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate everything. Thanks a lot.
Hey, you bet, man. Take care.
You've been listening to Quad M Show, copyright 2016, Quad M Productions. If you have any comments, questions, queries, quibbles, concerns, or just have something funny to say to us, feel free. Email us at quadmcomics@gmail.com or send us a tweet @QuadMComics.